let's do this thing.
Okay.
Well, I started bookbinding in 1995, so about 20 years ago, but I haven't actually been binding the entire time. I wish I had. I lost a number of years in there, which is one of the things I'm here to talk about. This is one of the earlier books I made. It was made for a friend of mine at IBM. I tried to reuse materials. This is a book I made as a Christmas card. Again, reusing materials. The stamp on the front came from my grandma. It's a number of Christmas stamps I inherited from her. This book is made up, well, with the help of my friend Michael, who's sitting in the front there, of 3 short pieces. This one is the essay by Dorothy Day, In Peace is My Bitterness Most Bitter, but I also included an essay by Christina Rossetti and the passage from Luke about the birth of Christ. And I'm not even particularly religious, and I wasn't at the time, but it was very satisfying to make. This is what's called a Coptic binding. It's an exposed thread sewn binding. On the front is my attempt to paint a North Korean postage stamp that I bought off of eBay. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, though. As you'll see in the close-up, that hawk, I think, really looks more like a penguin. But it was a lot of fun to do, and I spent many happy hours painting that. It turned out pretty nicely. I think Louise has that one. The next book is what's called a link stitch. I sewed the name of my friend Julie. Each thread links into the thread before it. It is an amazing pain in the neck to do, but when done right, it can be really, really, really beautiful. An example I saw was of a cat. That was just lovely. I'd like to try sometime. For my friend Adrian, up there, a big fan of Lizzie Borden. I made a Lizzie Borden Day card. The breakfast well adapted to set the stage for tragedy is from the Edmund Wilson essay about it. They served, I believe, mutton, cold mutton, and bananas for breakfast that morning, which explains a lot about the murders. You'll see those animals and objects reflected around the outer edge. And I made a pop-up element in the center there. It's really, in hindsight, a pretty ghastly object, but it was a lot of fun to make. This is a journal. It's a rounded and backed is the style. The paper on the cover comes from an 18th century book of fortifications. My mom, who's also here, was a dealer in prints and etchings and lithographs, and I accumulated many of the spare pieces left over from her business. I'm fascinated with saints and fascinated with 1950s football, so I combined the two in a set of saints trading cards. I included an advent calendar. This, of course, is St. Quentin. It's the same style as the 1950s football cards. Primary color is ridiculous, sort of line art there. This particular saint is the patron of bombardiers, against coughs, locksmiths, tailors, and against sneezing. The Catholic Church has a lot of questions to answer about St. Quentin. This is a Mayday coloring and activity book I made. It was a lot of fun. I grew up in the Midwest, and we spent a lot of time driving from Michigan to Hammond, Indiana, where my grandma lived, and to Chicago to visit it. And they offered these activity books in highway rest stops. And my parents were always too cheap to buy me one, so I thought I would make my own. This is the directions for folding a capitalist pig. I included Polish zloty notes for the capital. I have thousands of them. I made a sort of a rash error buying a brick about this big, waiting for the fall of communism. This I made for my godson Duncan, who's sitting up there. He has and had an interest in mythology, both Greek and Roman. This, of course, is Cyclops. The eye glows, as do the teeth. I made it for him when he was much younger, and he still has it, which is charming, but it is kind of terrifying. Why I'm here specifically is this image is of a heart from Leonardo da Vinci. Not too long ago, I went into cardiac arrest. Luckily, I was in a hospital at the time, and my cardiologist was standing right outside the door and revived me in less than 2 minutes. And while I was there, it wasn't so much death I feared as the fact that I hadn't done enough. I hadn't been spending time creatively, which are the things I really cared about. And it's led to a huge creative surge since then. The books you see are things I've made all since that event. The one on the previous slide was made for a dancer at Boston Ballet, where I work, a very nice man named Boyko Dasev. I have no idea who I gave this one to. This is a clamshell box, a miniature one, about yay big, and this is the book that's inside it. I've become fascinated with making miniature books. It's very satisfying and requires sort of a level of finicky skill that I don't quite have yet, but it's kind of fun to play with. And I love making boxes for the books. It's almost more satisfying than making the books themselves. And these are two more examples. These are full-sized, made for some friends of the family who did me an enormous favor recently. The marble paper comes from Spain. The cloth, is just sort of standard book cloth. And these are clamshell boxes, and you can see the books inside them. My happiest moments have been spent making things with my hands, frequently with a football game on in the background. And I encourage you not to regret time you didn't spend doing things you enjoy.